On a distant planet far away in a galaxy unknown to Earth, a race of beings stood at the pinnacle of knowledge and power. They were the twins from the alien species of the Vaxorvans. Their intelligence was unmatched by anything in the galaxy. Their technology had solved problems humanity could never dream of, and their civilizations flourished in ways the humans could only imagine. The Vaxorvans had long watched Earth and its inhabitants from afar, curious, but with little interest in interaction. The humans were primitive in comparison to the Vaxorvans, yet their fascination with this strange world never waned. The twins had always been curious about the different species they encountered, and Earth was no exception. There was something about humans that intrigued them, their emotions, their unpredictability, their resilience, even in the face of their own shortcomings. The twins were assigned to a secret mission on Earth, to study its people, to gather data for their leaders, who had no interest in humans, but saw them as an anomaly in the galaxy, something worth observing, but nothing more. The twins arrived at the research station, set up on Earth, a facility nestled in the middle of a remote part of the planet. The station was where human scientists came to study new technologies and research the unknown. Their assignment was simple: observe the humans, interact with them, but never interfere. The twins were given specific instructions to blend in, to observe without being seen, to learn the intricacies of the human mind and its emotional complexity. It was not a mission to intervene or change anything. It was simply about understanding a species that had yet to reach the level of intelligence that Vaxorvans had achieved. For weeks, the twins observed the humans. They watched their habits, their behaviors, their emotions. Each day at the station, the twins learned more and more about Earth and the people who inhabited it, their strength and their frailty, their anger and their love. But no human had caught their attention like the young scientist who worked late into the night on his experiments. He was unlike the others. He was driven with a passion and focus that the twins found intriguing. They had never encountered someone who could pour so much of themselves into a single task for days on end, yet still maintain the will to continue when the results were not what he had hoped. They had watched him from a distance. His persistence was something the twins couldn't comprehend. Their own species would never waste such time on a fruitless endeavor. But this human, this scientist, he seemed to find meaning in the struggle and the trial and error of his work. He felt something beyond logic and reason, something that Vaxorvans had never truly understood. As days passed, the twins grew more curious about this human. They began to sneak closer and closer to his workspace, watching his every move as he worked. They studied the way he interacted with his colleagues, how he greeted them with kindness, but with a distant professionalism. They studied the way his eyes would light up when he had a breakthrough, the way his face would fall in frustration when things didn't go as planned. But it wasn't just his work that captivated them, it was something deeper. There was something about his very presence that resonated with them, something they couldn't place, something they had never felt before. The twins decided one evening to observe him more closely. They had learned that he would often stay late in the lab working on his experiments. When the station was mostly empty, they made their way through the quiet hallways of the research station, trying to remain unnoticed. Though their abilities allowed them to blend in, they were still not accustomed to the human environment. They had no experience with human technology or social structure. They moved silently through the hallways, one of the twins leading while the other followed behind on silent feet. Their hearts beat faster with excitement and anticipation. They reached the lab, where the scientist worked late into the evening. They peered through the doorway and saw him inside, hunched over his work. He was too focused to notice the twins outside watching him. They were fascinated by how deeply immersed he was in his task. He didn't stop to eat or rest. His attention was completely on the experiment. Before him, the twins exchanged a glance. One of them whispered softly, but the words were lost in the silence of the hallway. Then, without thinking, they stepped inside the lab, hoping to get a closer look at the human in his element. They were so absorbed in their curiosity that they didn't notice the door had creaked open, and the scientist had turned just in time to see them. The moment the door opened, he looked up in shock, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly agape, as the twins froze in the doorway, not knowing how to react to the unexpected encounter. It was too late to retreat, and too early to explain their presence. The scientist blinked a few times, as if trying to understand what was happening. He took a step back, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. They had no idea how this meeting would unfold, or what would happen next. but something deep inside them stirred. It wasn't fear or anger. It was a feeling they had never experienced before, and it left them questioning everything they knew about themselves. The scientist stood there frozen, staring at the twins', mind racing as his eyes flicked between them and the door, as if weighing the possibility of running or calling for help. But something kept him rooted to the spot. They weren't threatening, they weren't aggressive. They just stood there as though they were as surprised by the encounter as he was. His heart raced in his chest, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. He didn't know what to say or how to process what was happening. All he knew was that these two beings standing in front of him were unlike anything he had ever seen. Their appearance was striking. Their skin glimmered with a faint iridescent sheen. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence, and their presence was so intense it felt as though the air had thickened around them. He wasn't sure what they were or where they came from, but he knew one thing for sure: they weren't human. And yet, they seemed to understand something about him. As they stood in silence, the twins exchanged a quick glance, their minds racing as they processed the situation. They had never expected to be discovered so quickly. They had assumed they were invisible to the humans here. But now that the human had noticed them, they didn't know how to react. Their mission was simple: observe. But they hadn't planned on making themselves known. They had no idea how to explain their presence, how to communicate with the human who was now staring at them in confusion and fear. The first twin, who had been leading, took a slow step forward, her eyes never leaving the scientist. She was the more curious of the two, the one who was always eager to learn more. And now she was filled with a deep sense of intrigue. This human was different. He wasn't like the others they had seen on Earth. He had a kind of energy about him, something almost magnetic, something that made him stand out from the rest of the humans. They had observed her twin, watched her every move, still uncertain about the next step. But he trusted her instincts. He knew she had a special connection with the human, something he couldn't explain. It was as though the human held a piece of something they didn't fully understand. Yet the first twin spoke, her voice soft but clear to the scientist. As she finally broke the silence, she asked him who he was, what he was working on. Her tone was curious, but not threatening. She wasn't trying to frighten him. She genuinely wanted to understand him and his work. The scientist blinked again, still trying to process what was happening. He looked between the twins, unsure of how to respond. Finally, he found his voice and said he was just a scientist working on an experiment, something that had taken months to perfect. He wasn't sure if he should continue explaining himself or ask if they were some kind of government agents. But there was something in the way they looked at him that made him hesitate. He didn't feel afraid, not like he would if someone had come to threaten him. No, instead, he felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity and a deep desire to understand them, just like they seemed to want to understand him. The twins didn't fully comprehend his words, but they understood his emotions. They could feel his confusion, his curiosity, and something else, something deeper, a strange mixture of fear and awe, as though he had just stumbled into something far bigger than himself. And as they stood there before him, they could sense that this encounter was going to change everything for all of them. The second twin stepped forward now, his interest piqued by the scientist's response. He was more reserved than his sister, but he couldn't deny the strange connection. He felt. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something in the air, something that told him they needed to learn more about this human. He turned his gaze toward his sister and nodded in agreement. They would stay, they would observe, but this time it would be different. They couldn't just watch from the shadows anymore. They would have to step forward and engage with the human in a way they hadn't anticipated. The first twin turned back to the scientist and asked him if they could help, if he needed assistance with his work. The scientist looked taken aback by the offer. He hadn't expected these beings to want to help him, but their presence was so genuine, their curiosity so real, that he found himself nodding slowly. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but something told him that these two were not the ordinary beings they appeared to be, and maybe, just maybe, they could teach him something that would change the course of everything he thought he knew about the universe. The scientist took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He wasn't sure if he was dreaming or if the reality of the situation had finally caught up to him. But something in the twins' demeanor told him they weren't here to harm him. They were genuinely curious about him and his work, and that curiosity seemed to extend far beyond what he could explain or understand. They had offered to help him with his experiment, which was something he never expected from beings like them. It was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The first twin moved closer, her eyes scanning the room as she took in the various pieces of equipment that littered the lab. She didn't seem overwhelmed or intimidated by the complex machinery. She seemed to understand it instinctively, and that only deepened the scientist's confusion. How could they know so much yet be so different than anything he had ever encountered? They didn't appear to be from any known civilization he had studied, not even in the most advanced scientific texts he had read. And yet they stood there as though they belonged in this place as much as he did. The second twin stayed near the door, his gaze never leaving the scientist, his mind working through the possibilities. The human was fascinating. He could sense the scientist's hesitation and uncertainty, but there was something else too, a spark of determination and resolve. The human had something inside him that the twins had never seen before. It wasn't just his intelligence, it wasn't just his technology or his understanding of the world around him. It was his resilience, his willingness to continue despite the odds stacked against him, that intrigued them most. This human had something that was not just physical or intellectual, it was something deeper. And as the first twin continued to look over the scientist's work, she felt that same spark begin to grow inside her too. She felt the pull, the desire to understand him more, to learn from him in ways she never anticipated. She wanted to know how he could think, how he could feel, how he could push through failure after failure without giving up, without losing hope. It was a power that Xorvans had never known, and it both baffled and fascinated them at the same time. She looked at the scientist and spoke again, this time her voice softer and more earnest. She asked him if he had ever considered that there was more to his work than just the experiment he was conducting, more than just the technology he was trying to perfect. Did he ever wonder what he was truly searching for with each step forward? What was it that drove him to keep going when most would have given up? The scientist blinked again, still unsure what to say, but there was something in her voice that made him pause for a moment. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. It was as though she was asking him to dig deeper into himself, to find the answer that wasn't written in any scientific journals or research papers. It was an answer only he could provide. And as he looked at her, something inside him shifted. It was a question he had asked himself countless times, but never really answered. He had spent so much of his life focused on his work, on perfecting his experiments, on proving that human beings could rise above their limitations, that he had never truly stopped to ask why he was so driven to do so. What was it that kept him going when everything seemed impossible? The second twin finally spoke, his voice calm and measured, as he asked the scientist about his motivations. What was it that made him continue in the face of adversity? What was it that made him so different from the others? They had observed the scientist hesitated, at first unsure how to explain something so deeply ingrained in his nature. But then he realized he had never really tried to articulate it before. He simply said that it was the pursuit of knowledge, the desire to push the boundaries of what was known and discover new things. But even more than that, it was the hope that one day the work he did would make a difference, that it would leave a lasting impact on the world. He was a part of the twins, listened intently, absorbing his words. And for the first time they began to understand what had drawn them to this human. It wasn't just his intellect or his abilities, it was his drive, his passion, his belief that humanity could be better, that despite all their flaws, there was something in the human spirit that refused to give up even when the odds were against them. It was a power that Xorvans had never encountered before, and now they found themselves captivated by it. They realized that they weren't just here to observe, they were here to learn from the humans, to understand the strength that came from their vulnerability, the hope that lived within their struggles, and the resilience that propelled them forward, even when the universe seemed determined to stop them. As the conversation between the scientist and the twins continued, the room seemed to grow heavier with unspoken emotions. The twins felt something shift deep within them, a stirring they couldn't quite name. But it was undeniable. They were no longer just observing, they were engaging, they were beginning to understand humanity in a way they had never anticipated. Before, the scientist spoke with more passion, now explaining how his work was more than just an experiment to him. It was his life, his purpose. He explained that every failure only made him more determined because he believed in the potential of progress and in the ability to change the world, even if it meant sacrificing everything in the process. He told them about the moments of doubt he had to fight through, the loneliness, the long hours spent in the lab working with minimal results, yet he always pushed forward, because he believed that one breakthrough could change everything. And as he spoke, the twins listened intently. They had never heard anything like it before. This wasn't just about intellect or the pursuit of knowledge. This was something deeper, something that resonated with the very core of their being. The first twins stepped closer to the scientist, feeling the pull of his words. The intensity in his voice was something she had never experienced before. Her own people, the Xorvans, were known for their intellect, their efficiency, their ability to solve problems with a cold detachment. But this human, this scientist, he was different. He was driven by something more, something that transcended logic and reason. He was driven by hope and belief in something greater than himself. And as she listened, she felt a flicker of something inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite grasp, but one she knew was important. She turned to her sister, who was standing silently by the door, and exchanged a glance. The second twin's expression mirrored her own confusion and wonder. But he too couldn't deny the shift that had occurred inside them. Both the human had awakened something in them that they hadn't known existed, a deep curiosity about the human spirit, something that reached far beyond knowledge or technological advancements. The scientist looked between the twins' hearts, still racing from the depth of their conversation. He had never imagined he would find himself in this situation, where two beings not from Earth were listening to his every word, hanging on to his every thought. They didn't judge him or look down on him, they simply listened. And as strange as it was, it felt comforting. It felt like he was being understood. For the first time in his life, he couldn't help but feel a connection to them, a bond that went beyond their physical appearance or their otherworldly abilities. It was as though they had seen something inside him, something that others had never seen or perhaps never cared to see. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone in his struggles or his dreams. He felt like they shared a part of his vision, a part of his desire to make the world a better place. And the more he spoke, the more the twins seemed to understand him. The first twin's voice broke through his thoughts as she spoke softly, asking him what his next step was. What did he hope to achieve next in his work? The scientist paused for a moment, the question catching him off guard. He had always been so focused on the next step that he hadn't really stopped to think about the bigger picture. He had always been driven by the idea of progress. But what was he really striving for in the end? What was the ultimate goal behind all his work? He took a breath and admitted to them that he wasn't sure anymore. He knew what he wanted to accomplish, but the deeper reason why he was doing it had become blurred over time. He had become so focused on the immediate results, the next breakthrough, the next discovery, that he had forgotten why he started in the first place. It was about making a difference. It was about creating something that would change the course of history. He wanted his work to matter, and not just for him, but for the world as a whole. The twins listened carefully, each word he spoke resonating with them in ways they hadn't expected. The second twin spoke for the first time, his voice low and thoughtful. He asked the scientist if he believed that humans had the potential to truly change the world, if they had the capacity to rise above their own flaws, their own limitations. The scientist thought for a moment before answering yes. He believed that humans had that potential, but it was not something that came easily. It was something that had to be fought for. He explained that it was in humanity's nature to struggle, to fight against adversity. But that was what made them strong. It was their resilience, their ability to rise after every fall, that made them different from other species. He told the twins that the strength of humanity wasn't in their intellect or their technology. It was in their spirit, in the way they refused to give up, no matter how many times they were knocked down. And as he spoke, the twins began to understand. They began to see the power in humanity's resilience, the strength in their struggle, the hope in their persistence. It was something that Xorvans had never truly understood, something they had never valued. And yet now, they found themselves captivated by it. They realized that what had started as a simple observation had turned into something far more profound. They weren't just learning about the human mind or body, they were learning about the human soul. And they knew that this connection would change everything for them both. As the twins stood in the lab with the scientist, they found themselves deep in thought. The conversation had shifted from mere observation to something much more profound. They were no longer just external beings, watching from a distance. They were now participants in the human experience. And it was something neither of them had anticipated. They had come to Earth to observe the humans, to study them and understand their behavior. But this human, the scientist, had somehow managed to show them a side of themselves they never knew existed, a side of the universe that was not defined by logic or cold intellect, but by something far more intangible, something that resonated with their very beings. It was a sense of wonder, a sense of possibility that went beyond reason, beyond calculations. It was hope, something that Xorvans had not truly known before they had been trained to think in patterns, to solve problems in the most efficient way, to look at everything as a means to an end. But this human, this scientist, had shown them that there was more to existence than achieving perfection, more than winning, more than achieving the next great breakthrough. There was something infinitely more valuable in the way humanity clung to their dreams. Even when the world told them they were impossible, the scientist's words continued to echo in their minds, long after he had stopped speaking. His belief in humanity's potential, despite all their flaws, despite their tendency to destroy and rebuild over and over again, had struck something deep within the twins' hearts. They had come to Earth with a cold perspective, observing from a distance, treating humans as a curiosity. But now, as they stood in the lab, looking at the human before them, they couldn't help but feel a new sense of respect for these fragile beings and what they were capable of. The first twin spoke first, her voice filled with a new emotion, one that wasn't there before. It was an emotion she had never experienced in her lifetime, a mixture of awe and admiration. She asked the scientist what kept him going when everything seemed impossible. How did he find the strength to keep pushing forward when every path seemed blocked and he was faced with failure after failure? The scientist thought for a moment before answering him with a quiet smile. He explained that it wasn't always about finding the solution or getting things right the first time. It was about the process, it was about the journey, and the lessons learned along the way. It was about not giving up even when there was no guarantee of success. He told them that there was a certain beauty in the struggle, that it wasn't just about the destination, but about what you learned about yourself in the process. He said it was about facing adversity and rising again, knowing that no matter how many times you fell, you could always try again. And that was what gave him hope. It wasn't the end result, but the belief that there was always another chance to do better, to learn more, to grow, and to make a difference. The twins listened intently. They were both struck by his words. His understanding of humanity's strength was something they had never truly grasped before. They realized that this was what made humans different from every other species they had encountered. It wasn't just about survival or intellect. It was about the spirit. It was about the ability to adapt and grow in the face of the most overwhelming challenges. And as they absorbed his words, a first twin felt something stir inside her. It was a sense of connection, something that bound her to the human and the world he represented. She felt the desire to learn more, to understand the depths of this emotion, this force that kept humans going even when everything seemed hopeless. She looked at her sister and saw the same recognition in her eyes. They both knew that this moment had changed them. It was no longer just about the mission or their purpose. They had become part of something greater. They had become part of the human story, and in doing so, they were beginning to see the universe in a new light. The second twin finally spoke, his voice softer than before. He asked the scientist if he truly believed that humanity could rise above its flaws and make the world a better place. The scientist nodded without hesitation. He believed it with all his heart. He said that it was the imperfections of humanity that made them beautiful. It was their flaws, their struggles, their need to grow that gave them purpose, that gave them the strength to make the world a better place. Even if they didn't always succeed, they were constantly striving to do so. And that striving made all the difference. The twins stood there in silence for a long time, their minds racing with everything they had learned in this one conversation. They had come to Earth with a mission, but now they realized they had found something far more important. They had found the essence of humanity, and in doing so they had found something in themselves that they had never known, something that would forever change the way they saw the universe. The first twin stepped forward once again, her voice filled with a quiet determination. She asked the scientist if he was willing to continue sharing his knowledge and his perspective with them, if they could learn more about humanity's resilience, about what made humans so unique in their struggles and triumphs. The scientist smiled and nodded, his heart full of gratitude for this unexpected connection with beings from beyond his understanding. He knew that this wasn't just about his work anymore. It was about something far greater, something that would leave a lasting impact not just on him, but on the twins and the world itself. The scientist looked at the twins, both of them standing before him with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the universe. He could feel the shift in the air. Between them, the connection that had grown so quickly, something that felt like fate, something that told him his work wasn't just about discovering the unknown. It was about sharing his understanding with those who were willing to listen, who were willing to learn and grow from it. And as he looked at the twins, he knew that this moment would be a turning point in his life, a moment where everything he had worked for would take on a deeper meaning. He could sense that they wanted more, they were hungry for knowledge in a way he had never seen before. It wasn't just about understanding technology or science. It was about understanding humanity. It was about understanding the strength, the resilience, the drive that pushed human beings to continue to strive for greatness, despite all the obstacles in their way. And he felt a deep sense of responsibility to guide them, to share what he knew, to help them see the beauty in humanity that he had come to understand over the years. The first twin stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. She asked him how humanity could overcome its weaknesses, how they could rise above their self-destructive tendencies, and truly make a lasting change to the world. The scientist paused for a moment, considering her question. It was a question he had asked himself many times over the years. How could humanity overcome its flaws? How could they rise above the greed, the violence, the apathy that so often defined their existence? And yet, he believed they could. He had to believe they could, or else everything he worked for would be in vain. He explained that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt and evolve. They didn't always get it right, but they always learned from their mistakes. They had the ability to reflect on their actions, to recognize their flaws, and strive to be better. He told them that the key to change lay in empathy, in the ability to understand one another, to see the world through each other's eyes, and recognize the shared humanity that connected them. All it was through empathy that humanity could heal its divisions, that they could build a world where everyone was valued, where the pursuit of knowledge and progress was balanced with the recognition of the need for compassion and care. The twins listened intently, their eyes locked on him, absorbing every word he spoke. They had never heard such a perspective before. They had never considered that the flaws of humanity might be what made them so unique. They had always seen weakness as something to be eradicated. But now they were beginning to understand that humanity's imperfections were not something to be discarded. There was something to be embraced, something that made them stronger, something that gave them the ability to evolve and change in ways no other species could. The second twin spoke next, his voice steady but thoughtful. He asked the scientist how humanity could maintain its sense of hope when so many forces in the universe seemed bent on tearing them down. How could they continue to believe in themselves when the odds were stacked against them? The scientist smiled at the question. It was one he had asked himself many times, but he had found his answer over time. He explained that hope wasn't something that came easily. It wasn't something that was guaranteed. It was something that had to be nurtured, something that had to be protected. It was easy to lose hope in the face of adversity, but that was when it mattered most. That was when hope became a lifeline, a force that could carry them through even the darkest times. He told them that hope was born in the small acts of kindness, the moments when people reached out to help one another, when they worked together to overcome challenges. It was in the belief that things could get better even when the path forward seemed impossible. And as he spoke, the twins felt something deep within them stir, something that had never been there before. It was the beginning of understanding, the beginning of a realization that there was something powerful in the human spirit, something that had the potential to change the universe in ways they could never have imagined before. They had come to Earth expecting to find answers to their questions, but now they realized that the true lesson was in the question itself. It was in the journey of discovery. It was in the understanding that the universe was vast and full of possibilities, and that the greatest discoveries were not the ones they could measure or quantify, but the ones that touched the heart, the ones that transcended logic and reason. The first twin looked at her sister and saw the same realization mirrored in her eyes. They both knew that this was only the beginning. They had much more to learn, much more to discover about humanity and about themselves. They understood now that their mission had changed. It wasn't just about gathering information anymore. It was about understanding the human spirit. It was about learning from humanity's strength and resilience and finding a way to carry that knowledge forward into their own lives and the rest of the universe. They turned back to the scientist And without a word, both of them stepped forward, their minds filled with new questions, new possibilities, new ways of thinking about the universe and the future that lay ahead. They had come to Earth with one purpose, but now they were leaving with something much more profound. They were leaving with the understanding that humanity's true power lay not in their intellect or their technology, but in their ability to continue striving even when everything seemed impossible. The room was quiet now, save for the faint hum of the equipment around them, as the twins stood silently contemplating everything they had learned in the past few hours. It was as if the scientists' words had opened a new door in their minds, and now they stood on the threshold of something much greater, something far beyond the mission they had come to Earth, for they had expected to find answers, they had expected to analyze the humans and report back with their findings, but now they realized they had discovered something that couldn't be measured or catalogued, something intangible, something that touched their very essence. They had come to Earth to learn about human technology, their societies, their behavior, but they had found something deeper, something that transcended knowledge and intellect. They had found hope. The first twin's eyes shone with a mixture of wonder and curiosity. As she turned to her sister, she asked if she had ever thought about the possibility that humans were not as fragile as they appeared. At first glance, a second twin looked at her for a long moment. Before answering, she had always viewed humans as beings bound by their limitations, as creatures driven by instinct and emotion. But now she was beginning to question everything she had known about them. They were not the weak and primitive beings she had once thought them to be. They had an inner strength that was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was a strength that came from their flaws, their imperfections, their constant struggle to improve themselves and the world around them. And as she thought about it more, she realized that it was this very strength that had drawn the twins to them in the first place. It was the human ability to keep moving forward in the face of impossible odds that fascinated them. And now they saw that it was this strength that had the potential to change not just Earth, but the universe itself. The first twin stepped forward, her voice soft, but filled with a newfound conviction. She asked the scientist what he thought would happen if humans truly embraced their potential, if they fully understood the power they held within them, if they stopped doubting themselves and took the leap into their future. The scientist looked at her with a thoughtful expression as he considered her question. It wasn't an easy answer, because he knew that humans had a long way to go. They still had their flaws. They still had to learn how to work together and overcome the divisions that separated them. But he also knew that there was something within humanity that could overcome these obstacles, something within them that could make them rise above their differences. He believed in their potential because he had seen it time and time again in the small victories, the acts of kindness, the moments of unity and cooperation. He had seen the human spirit at its best. And he knew that if they could embrace that fully, they could change the world and maybe even the universe. The twins exchanged another glance. This time a silent understanding passed between them. They had come to Earth to observe, but now they realized that their role was something far greater. It wasn't just about studying the humans. It was about helping them. It was about guiding them to see what they were truly capable of, to show them the strength that lay within them. All along they had learned from the scientist that hope was not something to be taken for granted. It wasn't something that would simply appear in times of crisis. It had to be nurtured and cultivated. It had to be protected even when it seemed impossible. The first twin spoke again, her voice filled with determination. She asked the scientist if he thought humanity could truly rise above the challenges they faced, if they could create a world where their dreams and their potential were no longer hindered by their flaws and limitations. The scientist didn't hesitate as he answered them with a quiet confidence. He told them that it would not be easy. It would require sacrifice. It would require people to work together, to face their fears, to confront their mistakes. But he believed that it was possible. He believed that humanity had the power to rise above anything that stood in their way. He believed that the future of humanity was not written in the stars, but in the choices they made, in every action they took to better themselves and the world around them. And as he spoke, the twins felt something stir inside them that had spent so much time observing humanity from a distance, trying to understand them. But now they saw that the true power of humanity wasn't in the things they had created or the wars they fought. It was in the way they could change it, was in the way they could learn from their mistakes and grow stronger. Because of them, they realized that this was what they had been sent to Earth to discover. It wasn't just about the knowledge they could gather or the technology they could study. It was about the potential they could help unlock in the human spirit, and in doing so unlock something even greater in the universe, something that would forever change the course of history. And as they stood there in the lab with the scientist, the weight of the realization hit them. They had not just found answers to their questions, they had found a new mission, one that would take them far beyond Earth, to the far reaches of the universe, to spread the knowledge they had gained, to help other species understand the power of hope, the power of resilience, the power of change, and the incredible potential that lay within all beings. And as they left the lab that day, they knew that their journey had only just begun. As the twins stepped out of the lab, their minds were swirling with new possibilities. Everything they had learned in the last few hours felt like a new foundation, a new purpose, not just for themselves, but for all of existence. They had come to Earth expecting to witness a flawed species struggling to survive, but they had found something far more powerful, something that went beyond survival. It was the essence of life itself, the determination to keep going, the drive to improve, to push forward, despite every setback, every failure. And as they walked through the halls of the research facility, they knew that they couldn't just leave this behind. They couldn't return to their people without sharing what they had learned about humanity, about the strength that lay within these fragile beings. The first twin spoke first, her voice filled with wonder and conviction as she asked her sister what they should do next. They had spent so much time observing and analyzing humanity, but now they were no longer mere observers. They were participants in a much larger story. They were witnesses to a potential that could change the entire universe. The second twin nodded slowly, understanding exactly what her sister meant. Their mission had changed. No longer was it about gathering information or studying humans. It was about helping them see their true potential and guiding them toward a future where they could embrace that power. She turned to the first twin, and with a firm voice, she said that they needed to stay, they needed to continue learning from humanity and continue helping them in whatever way they could. They couldn't just leave after what they had seen and learned. It was too important. Their connection with the scientist had awakened something in them, something that told them they could no longer be bystanders in this process. They had to take an active role in the future of humanity and the universe. The first twin agreed. She knew that staying would not be easy. There were many risks involved. They had already broken countless protocols by interacting with the humans in such a personal way. But it felt right, it felt necessary. They had learned something about themselves in the process. And they now understood that the universe was not a place defined by cold logic and efficiency. It was a place of growth and change, and humanity was a vital part of that. The twins spent the next several weeks immersing themselves deeper into human society. They observed more, they listened more. They began to understand the nuances of human culture, their hopes and fears, their dreams and struggles. They visited places of conflict and peace. They spoke with leaders and common people alike. They saw how humanity's resilience was evident in everything they did, from the smallest acts of kindness to the largest movements for change. They saw that hope wasn't just an abstract concept. It was something humans carried with them every day in their choices, their actions, their words. And as they continued to learn from humanity, the twins began to realize that they were not just observing them anymore. They were becoming part of the story, they were part of the journey, and they were beginning to see the world through the eyes of the humans they had once viewed from afar. They knew that they had much to teach humanity, but they also knew they had much to learn from them. And so the twins decided to stay on Earth for as long as it would take. They would continue to observe and guide humanity, but also learn from them every day. They would share their knowledge with the humans, help them unlock the potential they had seen within them, and help them see the universe not just as a place to conquer, but as a place to explore, to grow, and to change. They would help them understand that every challenge was an opportunity for growth, and that their flaws did not define them, but shaped them into something more. They would teach humanity that hope wasn't just a feeling, it was a force that could move mountains, that could shape the future in ways no one could predict. And as the days passed, the twins began to see small changes in the humans they interacted with. They saw people start to believe in themselves again. They saw communities coming together. They saw the spark of something greater than any technology or weapon, something that would endure long after the twins were gone. They saw the beginnings of a new future for humanity and for the universe itself. And so the twins remained on Earth, Now fully integrated into human society, they had come to teach. But they had learned just as much in the process. They were no longer just outsiders. Looking in, they were part of the human story, and they knew that the future was not something to be feared, but something to be shaped, something that could be built with hope and resilience and love. And as they watched the sun set on Earth, that evening they knew their work was far from done. It was just the beginning. The twins stood together watching the horizon as the sun dipped beneath the Earth's surface, the colors of the sky reflecting the complexity and beauty of what they had discovered. The world below them was filled with imperfections, yet those imperfections were what made humanity unique, what made them resilient, what made them capable of achieving things far beyond what anyone could have imagined. When they first arrived on Earth, they had seen only flaws. They had seen a species caught in cycles of violence and struggle. But now they saw something different. They saw potential, the potential to rise above their past mistakes and create something new. They saw people working together in ways that were once thought impossible. They saw communities coming together to face challenges with courage and compassion. They saw the spark of something greater than any technology could create, something that was fueled not by cold logic, but by the very heart of humanity. They had learned to understand the power of hope and resilience. And now they understood that this was the key to unlocking the true potential of every being, not just humans, but all species that ever lived or would live in the future. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about achieving some idealized version of what life should be. It was about the willingness to try, the courage to keep going even when the path forward was unclear. The twins had learned this from the humans, and now they carried that knowledge with them everywhere. They had come to Earth to observe, to study, to understand. But they had left with something far more profound, something that had changed them on a deep level. And they knew that this lesson would stay with them for the rest of their lives. And so they made the decision to continue their mission on Earth, to help humanity in every way they could, to guide them in unlocking their potential, to show them that no matter how difficult the journey might be, they could always move forward together. They would continue to share what they had learned with others, to teach that hope was not a fleeting feeling, but a force that could change the universe. They would help humans see that their true power lay not in their intellect or their ability to build machines, but in their capacity for growth, for change, for love and unity. They would help humanity to understand that they were not just part of a small, isolated world. They were part of a vast universe full of possibilities waiting to be discovered. And as the stars above Earth began to twinkle in the night sky, the twins felt a sense of peace, knowing that they had become part of something far greater than themselves. They had come to Earth to learn, but now they were ready to teach, to guide, to help humanity rise above its flaws and become something truly extraordinary. And as they walked toward the future, they knew they were not alone. They were part of a larger story, one that would span across the stars and across time itself, one where hope and resilience would always be the greatest forces in the universe.